The old farmhouse stood nestled in a valley. Rolling rice paddies stretched out like a patchwork quilt. It was a place where time seemed to move slower. The air, thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and wildflowers, always brought a sense of calm. For years, I had been visiting my grandparents in this peaceful haven. Every summer and spring break, I'd leave the city behind. The city felt loud and chaotic. The farmhouse offered a comforting silence. I loved exploring the nearby bamboo groves, their emerald green stalks swaying gently in the breeze. My grandparents, with their weathered faces and gentle smiles, welcomed me with open arms. Their love, as warm as the sunbeams that filled the farmhouse, always made me feel safe and cherished. Days at the farmhouse were filled with laughter, storytelling, and the simple joys of rural life. I helped with chores, learning to plant rice and pluck fresh vegetables from the garden. Evenings were spent listening to my grandfather's stories. He'd recount local legends and folk tales, his voice a soothing melody against the backdrop of crackling fire. I never imagined those stories, filled with mythical creatures and ancient spirits, would ever bleed into my reality. Not until that spring break when the world, as I knew it, tilted on its axis. It was during my spring break, a time when cherry blossoms painted the landscape in delicate hues of pink and white. I was walking back to the farmhouse. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields. That's when I saw her, a tall, slender figure dressed in a long white dress. She stood by the old stone wall that bordered our property. Her back was to me. Her long black hair cascaded down her back like a silken waterfall. There was something unsettling about the way she moved, or rather, didn't move. She seemed frozen in place, like a porcelain doll. "Hello?" My voice sounded thin and reedy in the stillness of the evening. The figure didn't respond. Instead, she began to make a strange sound, a rhythmic pop, pop, pop noise, like someone snapping their fingers but slower, more deliberate. It sent shivers down my spine. Curiosity warred with a sudden surge of fear. I took a step closer, then another. "Excuse me?" I called out again, my voice barely a whisper now. The figure remained still, the eerie pop, pop, pop continuing unabated. Just as I was about to call out again, the setting sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the world into an unsettling twilight. The figure seemed to melt into the shadows, disappearing as quickly and mysteriously as it had appeared. I rushed into the farmhouse, my heart pounding in my chest. My grandparents were in the kitchen preparing dinner. The aroma of miso soup and grilled fish filled the air, but my unease lingered. I told them about the woman by the wall, about the strange popping sounds and how she vanished into thin air. My words were met with a silence so profound that it felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. My grandmother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with alarm. My grandfather, usually the picture of composure, turned pale as he listened. "Did she see you?" my grandfather asked, his voice a strained whisper. "I don't think so," I replied, my voice trembling. "She was facing the wall the whole time." "We need to call the shrine," my grandmother said, her voice tight with urgency. She picked up the phone and dialed a number. Her words tumbled out in a torrent, a mix of fear and urgency that I couldn't decipher. My unease morphed into full-blown anxiety. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Who was that woman?" My grandfather pulled me aside, his hand gripping my shoulder tightly. His eyes, usually twinkling with mirth, were now clouded with worry. "That was no ordinary woman," he said, his voice low and grave. "That was Hachishakusama." The name hung in the air between us, heavy with dread. My grandfather explained that Hachishakusama, which meant 8 feet tall woman, was a malevolent spirit that had haunted the village for generations. Legend had it that she was a tall, beautiful woman who wore a white dress and a wide-brimmed hat, and yes, she made a distinct pop 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 sound. Hachishakusama, he said, was not a spirit to be trifled with. She was a powerful entity that preyed on young people, especially those who were far from home. Once she set her sights on someone, she would follow them relentlessly, her haunting calls echoing in their ears. It was said that those who encountered her and failed to protect themselves would vanish without a trace, their souls claimed by the 8-feet-tall woman. But why? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why would she be here? My grandfather shook his head. No one knows for sure, he said. Some say she was a powerful sorceress who was imprisoned here centuries ago. Others believe she's the vengeful spirit of a woman who was wronged by the villagers. Whatever the truth, she's a dangerous entity, and we need to protect you. A chill ran down my spine. The woman by the wall, the strange popping sounds, my grandparents' fear, it all pointed to a terrifying truth. I had stumbled into a nightmare, a world where ancient legends were not mere stories but a terrifying reality.